Hello, readers of Every Word, and welcome to Every Word 365. I'm your host, Christina Madsen. Today we're reading Genesis 45 through 47. Lots of talk today about the 12 tribes, which came from Jacob's 12 sons. These tribes will be referenced a lot in the Old Testament, so it's good to check out a link that has an overview about who the 12 tribes are. And of course, I'm including that link in the description, and it is from Got Questions. And since it was brought up in that link, I'm going to go ahead and again talk about the number 144,000. If you haven't heard about it or don't know much about it, then great. But if someone has ever told you that only 144,000 people will make it into heaven, be sure to read the link that I'm including that explains why some of us have heard that. It is very complicated, so consider yourself warned. Then we say goodbye to Jacob. Now you may have already read 45 because I hinted at that's the end of the story. So you may have already read that the day before. But if you ever want a Cliff Notes version of someone's life and what we can learn from it, Got Questions usually has a great summary on lots of characters in the Bible. And this is on the one on the life of Jacob. Jacob's name, Deceiver, does seem to characterize much of Jacob's life. But he was also Israel, one to whom God made promises to which he remained faithful. God appeared to Jacob, and Jacob believed God's promises. Despite Jacob's faults, God chose him to be the leader of a great nation that still bears his name today. But for this, it is unlikely that we would know much about Jacob, who appears to be in the middle of events while the key players are those around him. There is no great wisdom or bravery in Jacob to speak of, and we are tempted to see him as little more than God's passive instrument. If we are tempted to think that, because we aren't in the spotlight performing great acts for God, we are unimportant to him, then we should consider the life of Jacob and know that in spite of our failings, God can and will still use us in his plan. I just love that. Each one of us is so important to God's plan. As for Joseph's brothers, guilt is a powerful thing, isn't it? After Jacob's death, the brothers worry that Joseph will now seek revenge against them, meaning that they think the forgiveness was never really real in the first place. And this link is also from Got Questions, all about Joseph's brothers. Revenge was the last thing on his mind. Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." And that's in Genesis 15:19 through 20. In the story of Joseph and his brothers, we see the themes of forgiveness, the father-son bond, sibling rivalry, brotherly love, God's sovereignty, and God's greater good in times of suffering. Just like Joseph, we are called to forgive those who have offended us and see life's experiences as part of God's plan to help us serve others. So good, but so much easier said than done, right? Especially when they not only tried to kill him, they pretended he was dead. And Joseph forgave them genuinely and authentically. And I hope we can all learn a lot from that. And in today's daily walk, every experience in life, from the most pleasant to the most painful, has been allowed by God for a very special purpose. Now, we don't always see that purpose right away, do we? But that's where our faith and trust comes into play. And if I'm being totally honest, I never really knew what sovereign and sovereignty meant. It's kind of like if you grow up in church, you might hear that word a lot, but you may not actually know what it means. And I didn't give my life to Christ until I was an adult. And so I kind of passed over that. So I'm going to include a link that's got a great explanation and a fascinating analogy using an ant. So if you want to know more about that word sovereign, check out that link. Tomorrow's reading is Genesis 48 through 50, the last chapters of our first book. You're doing great. Happy reading.